It's our top story at this hour. The Democratic Alliance will not be in possession of the ANC's Cadre Deployment Committee records by the end of the working day. This comes as the ANC has confirmed to SABC News that the party has approached the Supreme Court of Appeal. Now, this comes after the Gauteng High Court in Johannesburg dismissed the party's bid to appeal an earlier ruling ordering it to hand over its cadre deployment records to the DA. The judgment on the 13th of June 2023 found that there was no reasonable prospect of success. The DA's interpretation is that this left the party with 5 working days to hand over the records dating back to the 1st of January 2013. All right, let's get some reactions. We're going to be joined via Zoom by the DA's Dr. Leon Schreiber. Very good afternoon to you, Dr. Leon. Thank you for your time with us here on the SABC.
Good afternoon and good afternoon to the viewers.
All right, apologies. You're obviously joining us by telephone there. Perhaps we could get your reaction to the ANC's next move in approaching the SCA at this point.
Yes, well, of course, it is the ANC's right to petition the Supreme Court of Appeal in this matter. But I think if you look at the context, it's a rather panicky and desperate move at this late hour. Because, as you've mentioned, the ANC not only lost the original case in the Gauteng High Court, but their leave to appeal application was also dismissed with costs, and the judge finding there that there was absolutely no prospect of a different court reaching a different conclusion. So the ANC is playing for time. I think they are really desperate to hide these records, and I think it's important for us to ask, if there is nothing wrong with the Cadre Deployment Committee and its system, why is the ANC so intent on keeping the truth away from the people of South Africa?
Absolutely. I think many out there also want to know what the DA wants to do with the records. And when we look at the principle of transparency that's now come to the fore, I mean, it's obviously going to be applicable to all political parties. And we're questioning whether the DA at this point can say that it doesn't apply cadre deployment where it governs.
Well, to just deal with the transparency point first, I think it's important to highlight here that there are, of course, elements of a private organization and a political party that the public does not have the ability to see. The problem for the ANC is that the cadre deployment policy very specifically, both in theory and in practice, impacts and interferes with the appointment of officials to the public sector. Now, as soon as you do that, when you use your private powers to influence an outcome in the public sector, then the information becomes relevant and the public has a right to know. So the ANC, if they are suggesting that somehow this will allow any person to see any of their discussions, that is not accurate. It relates specifically to the cadre deployment aspect. As for the DA, of course, like any political party, has selection processes when it comes to political positions, like ministers or premiers or MECs or mayors. But when it comes to the officials, heads of department, etc., those are run in terms of open and competitive selection processes. There is no cadre deployment committee, and that's why we end up appointing quality officials to those positions, because it is an open and transparent and fair process.
Dr. Leon, thank you for that context. Just in the interest of time, we're just looking at pressure groups and political parties turning to the courts, perhaps to deal with government failures at this point. And I wonder if turning to the courts is effective enough in fixing the failures, perhaps also ending corruption, due to deeply embedded systemic issues. How do we also begin to address those systemic issues?
Yes, I think that's a very important point. And both this case and the other case that the DA is currently involved in, where we are awaiting judgment from the High Court in Pretoria to declare the cadre deployment policy and system unconstitutional in its entirety, these cases are actually aimed at the systemic problems. So they are not looking at symptoms and particular instances of corruption, but they are actually aimed at the origin of corruption and state capture, and that is a system of interference in appointment processes, and that is why this is actually a systemic solution, not just looking at the symptoms.
All right, Dr. Leon Schreiber, I want to thank you for your time with us here on the SABC. We'll leave the conversation there. Dr. Leon Schreiber, just in reaction to the ANC now approaching the SCA. This, of course, is in regards to the ANC deployment case, cadre case, rather, that is currently unfolding. Developments coming through. We'll continue to monitor it, perhaps, as it unfolds.